Alright, testing. Alright, we're on part 4 of the instruction manual 02301-00101, revision 01, implementation National Environmental Policy Act, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Office Chief Readiness Support Officer. So, part 2, Chapter 4, Managing National Environmental Policy Act Implementation. Decision-making and integration of the National Policy Act with the Department of Homeland Security Mission. Department of Homeland Security filed with the directive of the instruction manual to ensure that the decision made in accordance with the policy pursued with the National Environmental Policy Act with the Department of Homeland Security integrate with the National Policy Act the process of the planning efforts of the earliest possible stage so that the environmental factors consider sufficient time to have practical influence the decision-making process before decisions are made within the components of the program to ensure that the appropriate of the National Environmental Policy Act analysis of the documentation complete with the before decisions made and irreversibility commits the resources and limits of the choice of the responsible alternative to satisfy objective to fix the problem and address the weaknesses developed in the program. Department of Homeland Security also integrated with the National Environmental Policy Act with the process of the review of the compliance requirements under the federal law, regulations, executive order requirements of the stewardship, protection of human environmental as involved with the Council of Environmental Quality guidance for such integration and the other requirements include but not limited to those listed in Appendix B. However, they comply with the requirements of stewardship, protection of home environmental policy does not reveal. Department of Homeland Security completing the National Environmental Policy Act processing complying with the National Environmental Policy Act. Conversely, compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act does not relieve the Department of Homeland Security complying with these requirements. Because of the diversity of the Department of Homeland Security is not suitable to describe the instruction manual with the decision making of every Homeland Security program proposal and council initiated level of the Department of Homeland Security organization submittal. Similarly, review with the approval authority to be exercised with the various levels depending on the nature of the action, source of the funding, statutory authority, etc. And the respective decision process components consider all of the National Environmental Policy Act documents and evaluating proposal for action and make relevant the National Environmental Policy Act documents comply with the responsible part, record of formal rulemaking and junctionary precisions. Proposal action being developed to ensure that the relevant National Environmental Policy Act document components or responses accompanying with the proposal through the appropriate formal project approval of the decision-making process to ensure that the National Policy Act analysis of the consideration making a decision. Proposal for action developed to ensure that the range of the responsible business operational alternatives being considered are appropriate and analyzed under the National Environmental Policy Act and evaluating the proposal for the action and other alternatives discussed relevantly to the National Environmental Policy Act documents considered with the evaluation unless the environmental policy documents are appropriately submitted to examine the newly developed alternative. B. Primary point of contact with the components. Each component provided with the director of the SEEP, which is what is it? I don't remember. Environmental plan. By primary point of contact with the National Environmental Policy Acts. For components seeking the delegation authority described in Section 4, Part K, with the point of contact referred to the Environmental Program Planning Manager. Activities requiring notification of SEP, and the components of the national notifying the SEP in writing otherwise associated with the National Environmental Policy activities to meet with the criteria listed below. The notification made with the earliest possible stage of substantial environmental with the ESEP, and the applicability approved of the director of the SCEP. National Environmental Policy activities of the action likely to receive the high level of the executive branch of the national attention include with those likely to record with the attention of the Department of Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, or with the Secretary, includes situation components intended to communicate with the federal agency regarding the National Environmental Policy Act. The SEEP program provides written notification components with the level of involvement within 5 working days of the notification as soon as possible for emergency actions. Emergency actions significant environmental effect of the components of the SEEP program as soon as possible. The director will meet with the SEEP Council with the Council of Environmental Quality. As soon as possible, develop the alternative arrangements completing with the environmental impact statement. See also Section 6. Emergency action for the potential significant environmental effect of the effects of the unknown. This is not sufficient time to prepare environmental assessment. Comply with the SEE program as soon as possible with the practicable means with the SEP coordinates of the Council of Environmental Quality as soon as possible regarding alternative approach to completing the environmental assessment. National Environmental Policy Act, the dispute for the conduct, resolve the component level 2 of the dispute resolution process for the Section 4, Part E. Require the Department of Homeland Security review for the component of the National Environmental Policy Act document originating with the other agencies receiving the components for the mission for the relay for the interest of the proposal of the SEEP program, coordinate with the request for the among the components to determine for the other mission-related interests in order to be involved with preparing the components. The SEE program acknowledges receipt of the being coordinated with the components within 5 working days of the notification as soon as possible for the emergency action. If the more than one component with the mission-related interests proposal, the SEE program normally prepared with a single department to respond with the input from the interested components. If only one component has mission related with the interest of the proposal, the SE program normally tends to respectively component respond directly with the requesting agency in C Section 4 Part J, where a component is led or joint led with the following with a review of the SE program prior to public disclosure notice of intent prepared with the environmental impact statement associated with the drafted final supplemental environmental impact statement is all the notice availability, all proposed notices of the environmental assessment to be published with the Federal Register. The SE program provided with the comments for the component within 10 working days of notification for the environmental impact statements, 5 working days of notification for the notice of intent, notice of availability, Federal Register, and notice of the environmental assessment is C Section 5 Part C and D. When components information posted with the Department of Homeland Security to the National Environmental Policy Act website page, information provided with the SEP is for both the Department of Homeland Security and the National Environmental Policy Agency webpage. A minimum of 7 calendar days advance of the day of the component seek for the make the environmental public the information publicly available is Section 4 Part G. Newly revised component supplemental instruction include with the components request for the delegation authority for the approval of the National Environmental Policy Act documents. The SEEP reviews the proof and new for the substantial revised component supplemental with the instruction for the following with the process documented in Section 4 Part K. Components of the provide with the section supplementary environmental program or as the SE program comply with the non-substantive charge with existing with the supplemental instruction, but not formally by the SE program is required. All National Environmental Policy Act documents that require the approval of the directive of the SEP, unless they otherwise delegated Section 4 Part K3, with the SEP program provides written with components within 10 working days of the notification for the environmental assessment, environmental impact statements, 5 working days notification records, environmental consideration. Our components of process for the chain with the categorical exclusion include the supported administrative records of the new substantive for the revised categorical exclusion, substantive for the revision deletion for the established for the new category exclusion. The SEE program review to provide written components within 10 working days with the being for the condition with the conventional environmental quality appropriate for the non-substantive chart with the category exclusion. The SEE program appropriate revises Appendix A, Table 1, also use Section 5, Part B3. Alright, existence of the circumstance of the may substantiate with impair with the components of the ability to fully substantiate requirements of the directive and instruction manual of the components of supplemental instruction if they exist for the Department of the Components of Environmental Project Program Manager. Significant portion of the staff that perform environmental planning activities also see Section 4 Part K3. Existing pattern of the non-compliant with the component substantial requirement of the directive instruction manual and component supplemental instruction if they exist see Section 4 Part K3. Collaboration among the Department of Homeland Security personnel provided regarding the National Environmental Policy Action was the issue with the result. Issues help promote efficient environmental planning with the National Environmental Policy Act, complying with the foster for the growth of the environmental planning expertise with the Department of Homeland Security to end with the SEEP program reasonable to facilitating collaborative efforts for the Department of Homeland Security to promote effective implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act. The SEE program used for the various communication methods include email distribution, list community, the work group for the component of the representation through these channels of the issue, their surface of the expertise of the Department of Homeland Security youth that developed the situation when they had numbers and they kept the rides approved and given the opportunity to provide the input for the current National Environmental Policy Act with an issue with those that developed the Department of Homeland Security that originate with the outside the Department of Homeland Security, such for the regulatory with the oversight agency for the environmental planning, historical preservation, decision support system, and see Section 4, Part 5, Part F of the also of the sharing of the knowledge for the past practice across the Department of Homeland Security. Components coordinated among themselves the resolve of and the project is specifically issued for the conflict for the dispute resolution process side in Section 4, Part E. The components raise common issue for the SCEP for the determination of the Department of Homeland Security wide solution is needed. Hurting the National Environmental Aid Policy Act process for the Department of Homeland Security and any other federal agency for the tribal, the local government of the public would not agree with a significant issue for the aspect of the National Environmental Policy Act. The review process for the proposed action in addition for the dispute may arrive with the Department of Homeland Security as for the National Environmental Policy Act for the process for the proposed action. The dispute arises, components require to keep the court record of the position of the interest as well for the other eventual resolution of the dispute. If the Department of Homeland Security power to seek for the resolution over the National Environmental Policy Act for the dispute with the lowest organizational level possible to follow the established organizational line with authority of elevating the resolve of the dispute. But if the National Environmental Policy Act dispute cannot be resolved at the component level, the component requests for the involvement of the director of the SCE program for the resolution. When the issue of the conflict beyond the authority of the director of the SCEP to resolve the dispute with the evaluated higher level of the Department of Homeland Security for the resolution following the established organizational line with authority. The external dispute arrived with the contact with a memorandum of understanding with a similar interagency with the agreement with the include with the dispute with the resolution provision for the term of the dispute resolution provisions are ordinarily filed Council Environmental Quality Regulation for the formal referral process that may be with the referring with the interagency disagreement with the Council of Environmental Quality regarding process for the proposed action considering an environmental impact statement that might cover the unsatisfactory environmental effects. See Title 40 CFR 1504 with the Commercial Council with the Environmental Quality Referral process used after they have concern over the unsuccessful attempt of the disseverance for the Department of Homeland Security or other federal agency, including the evaluation of the dispute with the director of the SCEP, with the Council of Environmental Quality Referral request for the component prepared for the referral package according to the requirement of Title 40 CFR 1504-3 with the submit with the packet with the director of the SCEP and the director of the SCEP program submits for the referral to the Council of Environmental Quality Alternative Dispute Resolution using Environmental Conflict Resolution at ECR.gov. The other annotations are for another option that may be used with the result of the interagency dispute with the additional environmental collaboration conflict resolution provided by the Council of Environmental Quality and off the Management Budget Memorandum Environmental Collaboration Conflict Resolution 7th September 2012, and then it gives you the link. The environmental planning and historical planning decision support system is an automated system that is enabled to standardize and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the Department of Homeland Security review the proposed action compliant with the National Environmental Policy Act. Requirement of the system is available to anyone access for the Department of Homeland Security regular network. The question for the review screen with the environmental planning and historical planning decision support system helpers users determine the proposed action may impact the quality of the human environment. Is enabled to ensure the appropriate level of the National Environmental Policy Act documentation prepared for the environmental planning, historical planning, and Department of Support decision support system. Also enable the knowledge sharing with the Department of Homeland Security regarding the environmental planning activities requirements of this as respiratory with the Department of Homeland Security, the National Environmental Policy Agency, for the documents review with the gather information necessary to meet internal, external environmental planning, historical planning reporting requirements, including the National Environmental Policy Act reporting requirements, reference over the EP and HP. The Department Decision Support System Instruction Manual includes version 2.0, further versions of the system and any successors. The Environmental and Planning and Historical Planning Department Decision Support System is used for the following to record applicant with a category exclusion listed in Appendix A, Table 1 that denote the asterisk. The main electronic version of the final National Environmental Policy Act, such as the record of council and environmental impact assessment and impact statements, finding no significant impact records of the decision, as well as associated documents been included but not limited with the memorandum of agreement of project arrangements for the biological assessment as determined the components for the supplemental instructions. And instead of environmental planning with the Department of the director of the decision support system is not available if the server is down with the components, mainly with the record REC. Using the table to provide with appendix C for the components made with the proposed modification template with the supplemental instructions provide with the components. Specifically, the template remains compatible with the EP, HP, the decision support system and components will include the supplemental instruction that the REC template with the prepare of the REC for the environmental planning, historical department and supply system The decision support system is not available. The environmental historical planning decision support system becomes available. The components of upload the manually complete with the REC PDF format with the system to no additional review conducted of the environmental planning, historical planning decision support system is necessary. Additional information requirements on the use of systems such as user roles and workflow provided only with the environmental planning historical directive support system. G. Public environment. Public involvement. Open communications consistent with the federal requirement of the Department of Homeland Security and policy with the environmental government collaboration. Public involvement. Improvement the efficiency of the Department of Homeland Security activities with the bill with the trust beyond the Department of Homeland Security and serve in addition with the collaboration with the federal, tribal, state, and local agency with the non-governmental organization, general public effective way to identify the environmental issue, the need with the conservative with the Department of Homeland Security playing with the decision making with the Department of Homeland Security. Public involvement is in use with the National Environmental Policy Act process for defining the scope of the issue with the level of analysis. During the Nepa National Environmental Policy Act, the process for the formation of documents is made available to the public to comply with the Council of Environmental Quality Regulation Title 40-15066 of the Public Environmental Staff starts earlier. Continue with the National Environmental Policy Act. Process component of the schedule of sufficient time to make diligent effort to ensure that the potential for the interested parties are defined, notified, and to appropriately provide for the input for the band that could have the practical influence of the proposed the Department of Homeland Security action. Before decisions are made, components of the made information from the National Environmental Policy Act for the activities available to the publicly through the variety of the notification methods of included but not limited to the Federal Register newspaper to notice of the web postings and other media as appropriate, specifically drafted final environmental impact statement, notice of the availability as published for the Federal Register with the Section 5 of the Part D8, and general collaboration publicly involved with the National Policy Act for the activities that include the following three key elements: seeking information outside parties to help identify the relevant source of the president, presenting the result of the environmental impact evaluation for public view and comment, including description on how the identified relevant issue for the considered evaluation. 3, providing with the public note of the Department of Homeland Security final decision, including the consideration of relevant public comments. Public involvement requirements. Department of Homeland Security lead agency for the proposed action. Department of Homeland Security responsible for the nature of the extent of the public involvement for efforts with the public environmental efforts of the tailor for the nature of the proposed act, the environmental impact of the issue for the concern of the characteristics of the individual community to be reached, special outreach for the efforts of the reach effective with minor populations with low-income populations appropriate to the environmental, ensure consideration of environmental justice pursuant to Executive Order 1289-8, federal actions to address the environmental justice of the minority population, low-income population, cgpo.gov, FTE system package FR 1994-02-16. The Council of Environmental Quality guidance consideration of environmental justice of the National Environmental Policy Act dated with December 10th, 1997, the Department of Homeland Security Environmental Justice Strategy. It gives a link in the translation of the National Environmental Policy appropriated with the reach communities with the limited English speakers, coordinated with the effect of the tribe of the Native Hawaiian organization is either of the requirements of the meet the conjunction with the National Environmental Policy Act, public involvement in activities except for the Order 1317-5 of the consultant coordinated with the industrial tribal governments, directs all federal developments of the strength of the United States with the government relations with the Indian tribe established regular with a meaningful consultation collaboration, tribal official for the development of the federal policy have tribal implementations components considered for the following factor to determine the appropriate nature of the extent of the public involvement of the efforts of the proposed action, type of the proposed action, whether the proposed action is international, national, regional, local interests, potential environmental impact of the proposed act, the extent of the previous environmental analysis of the proposed action, and the order geographical location action would be occurred. The extent of the anticipated controversy over the potential environmental effect of the proposed action based on Department of Homeland Security experience with similar proposed actions. The urgency of the proposed action. National security classification proposed action. The presence of the title or tribal and minority low income population that may be impacted with the proposed action. Other laws requirement to protect the environmental that may require public review with explaining example of determination conformity with the state air quality implementation planning that may require public review. Alright, 2, the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agents website of the SEP with the benefit of the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act webpage at departmentofhomelands.gov/NEPA. According to the Department of Homeland Security, Office of the Public Affairs with the requirements of the central location web posting of the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act and documents. Components may be either with the SEP, with the electronic file, with the OPA, with the requirements of the posting of the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agency website link with the respective components of the web page of the National Environmental Policy of the documents posted with the components maintained with the central web page with the components used for the website with the other federal agency with the component of the National Environmental Policy Agency document with the link to the web page either provide with the SEP with the program including for the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agency website and Policy Act with the website with the component that include its own National Environmental Policy Agency Act web page. The SEP submits all of the content included with the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act webpage of the OPA with approval of the SEP program manager for the web content in accordance with the guidance established for the OPA. The Department of Homeland Security Connect. Department of Homeland Security Gov/org comp OPA web pages default. And the Office of Management and Budget Policy for the federal agency public website with the whitehouse.gov site for the default sites Office of Management Memorandum official year 2005 M0504. Components to which the development maintain with the own web page for the posting of the National Environmental Policy content with the coordinate with respect to the OPA. Equivalent components to provide with the address for the National Environmental Policy for the page of the SEP and SE program creates a hyperlink with the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agent component web page. Components that will wish to link with the National Environmental Policy Act within components posted for the website out with the federal government domain through contractor wide with the seek with the respect for the OPA with the OPA to determine the case-by-case basis whether or not it's allowable to link with the contractor maintain website with the environmental impact of the statement, the record of the documents for the either posted directly with the link with the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act of the web page in addition with the environmental assessment of the FONIS for the proposed action, determine the effect of the national concern, posted directly linked from the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agency website with the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act web page is optional posting with the environmental assessment, FONSCI's proposed action with the effect of the regional and local concerns as long as another public notice is provided where the component is joint lead agency for the joint lead agency determine the appropriate host of the federal government domain. Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Agent website presently intimidate you with deliberately the exchange information component of the may be necessary for the development of the National Environmental Policy Agency document. However, the use of the web page may change the OPA. Allow for the following content for the SCP program posted with the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act web page for the following requirements apply. Documents meet with the OPA with the web publishing guidance standard with the Department of Homeland Security branding requirements section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act requirements. B. The documents are in the PDF format inclusive of the figures appendix for the document and hyperlinks incorporated with the reference. C. Applicable components include with the point of contact start end of the date for the public comment period information wherever the interest person may submit for the comments components to provide with the SE program minimum 7 calendar day with advance for the day of the seek with the make of the information policy of publicly available National Environmental Policy Act with the documents related with the emergency act and the other time sensitive situations appropriate to SE program requests for the OPA with the expedite with the approval of the posting of the web content. R3. Federal National Environmental Policy Agency contact. The Council of Environmental Quality maintains the list of the Federal National Environmental Policy Agency contact with the website. The Department of the Federal National Environmental Policy Act for the contact the director for the SE program with his or her designee. For the person interested with the Department of National Environmental Policy Act activities may contact the SE program by email. The SEP EPH HP headquarters, Department of Homeland Security. Contact information is available to the Department of Homeland Security National Environmental Policy Act webpage for the Department of Homeland Security NEPA. Information protected for the public disclosure no national security for the Homeland Security, the exemption for the complying with the National Environmental Policy Act, they have the information for the use of the National Policy Act and analysis is subject for the complying with the other laws, including Freedom of Information Act, Title 5 U.S. Standard Code 552. A Freedom of Information Act encourages the government accountability through the transparency provided with any other person with the right of the enforceable to for the court, and the court with the due obtain access for the federal agency record for the extent of the such record of the portion portion thereof, with the protective of the public disclosure, Freedom of Information Act exemption of these exemptions is designated with a strike of the word workable balance between their citizens needed to know what the government needed to protection certain information for Information Freedom of Information Act include the exemption that is available for the Freedom of Information Act Gov. The Department of the Freedom of Information Act provide with the Directive 04601 Freedom of Information Act complying with the Department of Homeland Security provide information for the public with the National Environmental Policy Act with the process for the Department of Homeland Security otherwise would not publicly disclose the Freedom of Information Act determine the National Environmental Policy Act with the Department of Homeland Security non-publicly to disclose the information that may be disseminated to the Americans that may reveal location of archaeological sites such as information not otherwise publicly available. The fact that the proposed action with the environmental analysis for the proposed action contained with the information protected with the Public Disclosure Freedom of Information Act exemption does not relieve the Department of Homeland Security for the requirement to accept for the document environmental activity effects of the proposed action required by the National Environmental Policy Agency for the existence of the proposed action cannot be made with the public or reason for the Freedom of Information Act exemption for the environmental analysis also cannot be made with the public. Some circumstances for the environmental analysis may be not subject to judicial review, nevertheless the environmental analysis is required. If the existence of the proposed action can be made with the public, the environmental analysis of the information cannot be made with the public, with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary of the reacts information for the project of the public disclosure for the appendix for the sentence with appropriately cleared reviews of the decision making allowed for the public review of the rest of the document and segregation redaction which will leave it essentially meaningless material for the Department of Homeland Security with the whole of the entire document of the public without over the Department of Homeland Security made such particular with the National Environmental Policy Agency for the document of the appropriate for the clear official for the agency for the commercial council for the environmental quality and environmental protection agency and in doing so for the important recognize for the preparer of the situation or other agency for the non-interpret Freedom of Information Act in the same way with the Department of Homeland Security does there may relieve of the material for the Department of Homeland Security not release except for the properly classified for the exemption subsection 552B1. If the existence of the proposed action must be protected for the public disclosure for the portion environmental analysis public protected for the public disclosure the component of the consult with respect to the environmental program project manager office of general counsel with the edge of the each possibility time with the ensure the National Environmental Policy Act for the compliance with efforts for the line with the property schedule for the extent of the practical to identify the Department of Homeland Security with the federal agency personnel with the tribal, state, local personnel that have appropriate clearance for reviewing classified information through the National Environmental Policy Act with the process of the roads the Department of Homeland Security aid and action components consult with the respectively Chief Security Officer of the General Counsel following Department of Homeland Security Council with the address for the access for the classified information such as information 121.01001 Administrative Security Program Instruction 121.01007 the Personnel Suitability Security Program. Her Council Environmental Quality 2009 Freedom of Information Act Handbook, White House website default /files microsite / Council Environmental Question, Council Freedom of Information Act Handbook 22712 provides additional guidance for the appropriate treatment information protected for the public disclosure. Alright, H. Use of contract. The National Environmental Policy Agency for the decision-making for the environmental general function of the Department of Homeland Security frequently contract with the perform activities for the National Environmental Policy Act with the substitute for the developing documents, conducting analysis, soliciting, and collecting public comments. The Department of Homeland Security may also allow with the federal assistance for the permanent allocation for the contract to perform National Environmental Policy activities. However, the Department of Homeland Security remain with the fully responsible for the National Policy activities performed by the contractors. Only the Department of Homeland Security employee can sign with the otherwise approved with the National Environmental Policy Act for the documents proposed with the proposed Department of Homeland Security actions. In addition, with the presence of the contractor name local for the documents for the prepared for the Department of Homeland Security include the National Environmental Public Agency for the documents should be minimized with the voided length and otherwise specified with the term of the particular contact priority information used for the contractor to perform the National Environmental Policy activities subject for the public disclosure should be approved. The appropriate information must include with the National Environmental Policy Act for the document pertaining to the information for the normally presented with the main body of the document, but segregated in appendices for the distribution be more carefully controlled. Alright, your performance metrics and reporting requirement. The performance metric for the important indicator for the compliance with the National Policy Act with the requirements of the implementation of the directive of the instruction manual with the Department of Homeland Security. In addition, with the Department of Homeland Security will respond with the Congressional Federal Interagency for the National Environmental Policy Act with the reporting requirement of the agency for the Council of Environmental Quality Cooperating Agency report. The SEE program issue for the data for the collect for the component of the necessary to obtain the information required with the external reports requirement and ensure for the consolidated with the respond with the Department of Homeland Security. SCE program also review the environmental planning, historical planning, decision supporting system to obtain information from the National Environmental Policy Act performance. In addition to the internal National Environmental Policy Act performance metric for the chief, although the Department of Homeland Security Chief Readiness Support Officer establishes the SCE program participation components of the community for the work programs. The components complete with a substitute with the National Environmental Policy Act performance information directive for the SCE program in accordance with the established requirements of the time frame responsive to such performance requirements of other evaluated SCE programs. Alright, I'll take a sip of water real quick. Alright, J, review other agencies of the National Environmental Policy Act for the documents. Components were requested for the review of the component of the National Policy Agency, the Policy Act. Documents provided by the non-Department of Homeland Security, federal, tribal, state, local, the proposed action may impact with the Department of Homeland Security mission, operation, facility for the other Department of Homeland subject matters, expertise, legal authority for the relevant to the proposed action with the such required to receive the component for the provide with the written notification of the SCE program prior to the issuing, and of the components requesting agent with the comments confined with the man with the jurisdiction and expertise of the Department of Homeland Security, including but not limited to the Homeland Security, the imminent communication, other law enforcement mission for the emergency management. The components of the normally do not comment with the aspect of the National Environmental Policy Act of the document provided with the non-Department of Homeland Security agent other than what is needed to appropriately reflect with the Department of Homeland Security authority for the initial interest. The components of the notified with the SCE program equipped with the component comment with the National Environmental Policy Act of the documents for the non-Department of Homeland Security agency for the meet with the criteria section 4 part C. Alright, your General Department of Homeland Security for the design provide formal written comment with the public record of the Department of Homeland Security context. Communicates with the interest of the federal agency for the use of the method to determine the case based on the appropriate for the nature and level of the Department of Homeland Security interest for the another agency for the National Environmental Policy Act for the activity. And if need with the component for the file for the disposition resolution prescribed process described in section 4 part E. Alright, K, with the component with the supplemental instruction and delegation of authority, unless otherwise delegated with the director of the SEP with the program with the approved with the National Environmental Policy Act with the documents prepared for the Department of Homeland Security with the component with it does not have the approved with the supplemental instruction of delegation authority with the described below with the director of the SEP program, so for the environmental planning program manager for the component with the director of the SE program mates of the environmental program planner criteria for the here and maybe here specified herein. Most efficient and effective implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act with the curves with the integrated with the early with the aspect of the planning review with the development of the Department of Homeland Security. This can be achieved at the local appropriate level of the organization with the process of the curve with the director of the SE program may delegate with the component with the authority to approve the National Environmental Policy Act. Documents ensure the most effective and efficient with the National Environmental Policy Act with complying with the components required for the delegation of authority. Supplemental instruction may be evaluated concurrently with the separately with the SE program depending on the components of the need. However, in order with the component with the receipt of the delegation authority, supplemental instruction approved by the director of the SE program is required. One of the components, supplemental instruction, components of the obtaining with this developing supplemental instruction for the implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act with respect to the organization unique mission need for the supplemental instruction description of the component for the direction of the process for the implementation director of the instruction manual for components to show for the development of the supplemental instruction but they require for the criteria content and be provided below where the criteria are met with the meeting through the existing policy for the required document. The component may be provided with a brief explanation relevant to the existing document that provide with the reference supplemental instruction describe the manner of the bullets for the directive of the instruction manual that be implemented include with the organizational lab of the National Environmental Policy Act activities approval of the curve within the component that describe the internal process for the requirement of the preparation approval of the National Environmental Policy Act with the document of the components including the process for the quality insurance describe how the component created for the record demonstrated through the federal employee with the decision making of the authority with the proposed with the action normally with the proponent with the consideration of the environmental impact of the proposed action process for the making of the decision that may be accomplished by the signature block in order to fulfill the requirement of the National Environmental Policy Act. Identify the position of the component with the authority to receive the implementation directive of the instruction manual of the active of the environmental program manager for the serve as the primary point of contact with the SE program, the National Policy Act. Manager of the environmental policy program manager has his or her staff have an appropriate level of expertise necessary to provide the technical assistance of the National Environmental Policy Act complying with the range of the program officer for the activity of the component of the additional criteria for the environmental program policy manager are as follows. Be appropriate with the position or organization that have the technical authority to speak with the National Policy Act of the matters of the behalf of the component. Be appropriate with the position of the oversee of the implementation of the directive of the instruction manual of the component. 3. Have the visibility planning development and implementation act of the component that may require the National Environmental Policy Act. compliance, including procedure for the redelegation of the authority with the component with approving the National Environmental Policy Act document for the appropriate with the redelegation procedure would include the requirement of quality assurance for the work product, process of granting redelegation of the criteria achieved with the redelegation. Or the Identification National Environmental Policy Act for the activities we call attention to the higher level of the component of the organization, including the component of the management level of the SE program, process for the criteria suspension, revocation of the redelegated authority identified by the National Environmental Policy Act for the activities we calling for the attention and approval of the higher level of the component organization as well as the SE pre that describe the environmental planning and historical planning direct decision support system and achieve the component, some of the roles and review for the establishing workflow, describe the process for the monitoring for the assessing of the complying with the directive of the instruction manual, including reporting the National Environmental Policy Act, the performance of the directive of the SE program, decision program of the seek for the resolution of the National Environmental Policy Act with the related dispute with the component of the National Policy Act. Disputes cannot be resolved at the component level to provide with the process of elevating dispute with the directive of the SE program. And if applicable, the policy describe the process for the requirement of the review of the application for the person of the organization, seek for the Department of Homeland Security approval of their procedure for proposed activities, federal assistance permits of the license to ensure that the National Environmental Policy has the compliance. In addition, to require the content specified in A through J with above the component of the additional information supplemental instructions deemed necessary for the implement of the National Policy Act of the organization, including other areas identified by the instruction manual with however the components of proposed new and substantial revised category exclusions separately with the supplemental instruction category exclusion proposed with the projection with the separately with the SE program or by the SE program of the Council of Environmental Quality Review and Public Information Requirements. See Section 5, Part B3. 2. Component supplemental instruction review and approval of the process of the following process for the SE pre-program review and approval of the component supplemental instruction. Component submitted with the SE pre-program thereafter the supplemental instruction immediately required with the content of the criteria described above the have the approve of the components of the appropriate of the approving official. Upon receipt of the components drafting supplemental instruction, the SE program completes its initial review provided over the comments back to the component within 15 working days if it cannot be resolved. Report between the SE program and the component within 10 working days thereafter evaluated with the chief CRSO, the equivalent resolution for the necessary for the issue further evaluated with the higher level of the Department of Homeland Security resolution following the established organizational line of authority. It is the SEP determining the component draft supplemental instruction containing the information for the Council for the Environmental Quality, public review of the SEP, coordinate with the efforts with the SEP to notify with the components of writing supplemental instruction that have been approved with the written notification, include with the delegation authority components, seeking with the delegation authority in conjunction with supplemental instruction. Components review that they are approved with the component supplemental with the instruction revised with the update of the necessary, but also the minimum where the directive instruction manual is revised. Alright, 3. Delegation authority. Components wish to obtain with the delegation approve of the authority of the approved National Environmental Policy Act with the document submit with the written request of the company with the proposed with the approved with the component with the supplemental instruction for the directive of the SE program. Order the component to receive the time for the delegation supplemental instruction approved with the directive of the SE program is required. Component request the level of the National Environmental Policy Act documents for which they are seeking the delegation of authority the director of the SEP remaining for the approval of the annual level of the National Environmental Policy Act with the documentation not included with the delegation. Approve the delegation writing with the director SE program with the component of the Environmental Policy Program Protection Policy Program Manager of the Environmental Policy Program Manager can redelegate with his authority according with the policy procedure established for the respect of the component supplemental instruction. Components may request for the approval of the directive of the SE approved substantive for the revision of complemental component with the supplemental instruction without the seeking of the new delegation authority. However, to approve of the additional level of the National Environmental Policy Act with the documentation components request for the new delegation with authority with appropriate revival of the component supplemental instruction for the director of the SE approved may revoke the component's delegation of authority upon the finding of the prior non-compliance subsequent substantive requirements of the director instruction manual, which may include repeated failure to follow the inspection, respective of the improved component supplemental instruction. Director of the SEP with the mandate direct with the suspend with the component delegation authority with the circular evidence of the paragraph D above that have the impact of the applicability of the component effectively improve implement substantive the requirement of the directive of the instruction manual of the department, e.g. with the department of the qualified staff of the organization. After the component who delegation with authority has suspended with the revoke that must be remedied to issue concern with the demonstrate with the meet of the requirements of the section 4 part K, meet for the written with the request of the director of the SE program to have the delegation authority reinstated and issued related to the suspension, revocation of the delegation authority that cannot be resolved by the SE program components are elevated with a higher level of the Department of Homeland Security resolution following established organizational lines of authority. Or the component may request the interim delegation of the authority situation where they have to draft a supplemental instruction with respect to the directive of the approval of the process of the completed directive of the SE program agreement with the interim delegation of the authority with the up to 6 months of the component with the provide with the draft of the supplemental instruction the satisfactory adjustment of the required criteria for the time to the descriptive above as to the minimum head of the entry for the component with the formal clearance process when the request for the extension of the interim delegation authority bill will be granted with the directive of the SE program and the evidence for the component will proceed in good faith and complete with respect to the directive of the approval process. Alright, L. Administrative record requirements. In complying with the National Environmental Policy Act with the government decision making with it cannot be arbitrary with the capricious of the decision of the Administrative Procedure Act, provide with the framework of the judicial oversight of the executive branch decision making with the Administrative Protection Procedure Act, provide with the court with a review of the whole record of the parts of the cited by the party. Therefore, the administrative records of the compilation of all the documents material with exam of the National Environmental Policy Act, even if examined, they need not be with the federal agency decision maker at the time of the final decision on proposed action was made, but includes the document material with the support. Contrary to decision, imports the note that the information from the restricted public of the Disclosure of Freedom of Information Act is examined with the National Environmental Policy Act. Process may be the appropriate with the part of the administrative record for the completeness of the administrative record for the crucial with the litigation because of the court needs to be able to see the only things that include with the record of the rational process that will be agency came to the design reflected the record of document. Court does not have to agree to the agency's decision, but it must be rational based on the record of the decision. Court is not able to make this finding of the contract. Court may require project to be held under the National Environmental Policy Act with the process of the red done often under the very tight court with the direct time frame. An administrative record included with the public draft of the National Environmental Policy Act with the document. See Section 2 for the definition. Communication within commons of the federal and tribal, state, and local government federal system. The application public of the Department of Homeland Security respond with the comments of the material such as the data reports, other studies, computer modeling, maps, photographs, consider the agency's staff found relevant with the decision, especially with regard with the choice of the alternative. When the alternative ruled over the consider the National Environmental Policy Act, analysis is all part of the record with whether or not support with the decision from the National Environmental Policy Act document, whether or not they are generally available to the public with an internal memorandum regarding the issue related with the National Environmental Policy Act. Analysis were prepared with the proponent's decision on a proposed action, also part of the record of the draft documents merely clean up typographical error that do not need to be retained, but also care must be taken to ensure that no documents which are necessary to the judicial review process are destroyed. Each document is subject to the legal relevance test of the components complying with the thorough administrative record. Components obtained with the advice of the Office of the General Counsel of the record whether or not to leave something out of the administrative record. Once the agency decision has been made with a deliberative or pre-decisional basis for the keeping of the interagency document, which are part of the administrative of the record, provided with the public relief of the Freedom of Information Act disappears. The document may or generally do public release ability, however, they are another basis for the prevent release for the remain of entitled protection from release if they are part of the record. Section 4, Part G3, components of the Office of the General Counsel making decisions about what was reasonable and protected with the Freedom of Information Act. Or Section 5, procedures implementing the National Environmental Policy Act. And we'll cut the tape there.